Sarah had always dreamed of a quiet suburban life, filled with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. When she stumbled upon a charming house in Maplewood Heights, it felt like the perfect place to plant her roots. As the moving truck rolled away, Sarah took a moment to appreciate the sun-drenched front yard, its vividly colored flowers peeking through the white picket fence. Little did she know, her idyllic new beginning was about to be marred by the iron grip of the neighborhood's homeowners association. The HOA was notable not just for its presence but for its notorious leader, Karen. A self-appointed enforcer of all things proper and pristine, Karen was well known throughout Maplewood Heights for her unwavering commitment to maintaining a cookie-cutter appearance in the neighborhood. Residents whispered tales of her disciplinary campaigns against anyone who dared stray from the rules, whether it be slightly overgrown grass or a mailbox painted an unsanctioned color. On her first day unpacking, Sarah received a warm welcome from her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, who offered cookies and insights into the community. However, Mrs. Thompson's smile faltered when she mentioned the HOA meeting scheduled for that evening. "You'd better attend," she warned, Karen's keen on keeping everyone in line. Curiosity piqued, Sarah decided to go. As she entered the community center that night, she felt an undercurrent of tension among the residents as they gathered around folding tables adorned with brochures outlining HOA regulations. Karen stood at the helm, a short woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, addressing the crowd with feigned friendliness that quickly morphed into condescension. As Sarah listened to Karen read off infractions and penalties, a chill ran down her spine. It became glaringly clear that this wasn't just a governing body, it was a regime intent on micromanaging every aspect of life in Maplewood Heights. With her heart racing and apprehension settling in, Sarah knew that navigating this new world would require more than just patience, it would demand resilience against the looming shadow of Karen's control. A few days after settling into her new home, Sarah decided to enhance her front yard with some vibrant decorations to reflect her cheerful personality. She purchased a whimsical garden gnome and a few colorful wind spinners, picturing how they would bring life to the otherwise uniform landscape of Maplewood Heights. The moment she placed them in the flower bed, she felt a surge of excitement, envisioning her home's transformation into a welcoming oasis. However, Sarah's enthusiasm was short-lived. Just as she finished arranging her new decorations, she received an unexpected knock on the door. Standing there was none other than Karen, arms crossed and her expression steely, as if Sarah had committed a cardinal sin against the neighborhood rules. "Good afternoon, Sarah," Karen began, her tone deceptively pleasant. "I couldn't help but notice your interesting choices for yard decor." She gestured dismissively toward the gnome. "I'm afraid you may not be aware that our HOA has quite specific guidelines regarding yard ornaments." Taken aback, Sarah's excitement quickly morphed into confusion. I just thought they would make my home feel more inviting," she stammered, glancing back at the cheerful gnome that now felt menacing under Karen's scrutiny. Karen unfurled a printed sheet from her clipboard, detailing the obscure regulation against non-standardized lawn decorations, a rule Sarah had never heard of during her rushed onboarding into the community. "Unfortunately, this will incur a fine," Karen declared matter-of-factly. "And you'll have to remove them by the end of the week." Feeling both deflated and angry, Sarah couldn't believe how quickly her simple desire for self-expression had led to confrontation. As Karen turned to leave with a satisfied smirk, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning of her struggles within this seemingly perfect neighborhood. The fine was more than just a monetary penalty, it was a symbol of Karen's relentless authority that threatened to stifle her spirit. Determined not to back down, Sarah resolved to figure out how she could reclaim her sense of freedom and perhaps even challenge Karen's overreach in the process. To understand Karen's iron grip on Maplewood Heights, one needed to peel back the layers of her not-so-innocent past. Once a vibrant member of the community, Karen had arrived in Maplewood Heights with ambitions of unity and neighborhood improvement. However, her initial enthusiasm quickly soured as she faced resistance from residents unwilling to conform to her vision of perfection. The more she tried to enforce her ideas, the more isolated she became. Years ago, Karen had spearheaded an initiative to ban any form of personal expression in yards, no bright colors, no unique decorations, just bland conformity. When a family across the street painted their front door a cheerful blue, Karen rallied support from the HOA board to have it repainted white. The backlash was swift. Neighbors rallied around the family, forcing Karen to back down but leaving her bitter and resentful. This defeat only fueled her obsession with control. Her subsequent campaigns against any deviations from the established norms were relentless. Each time a resident dared to express their individuality, be it through unconventional landscaping or festive holiday decorations, Karen was quick to pounce, often armed with obscure regulations that left no room for interpretation. Tension simmered beneath the surface of maple trees and manicured lawns as neighbors whispered about Karen's cruelty and how she thrived on their discomfort. Though some residents complied out of fear, others grew increasingly frustrated by her tyrannical rule. The community meetings transformed from opportunities for dialogue into battlegrounds where dissenters were silenced with cold calculations and harsh penalties. Over time, Karen's reputation morphed from that of a well-meaning activist to a feared enforcer whose passion for control overshadowed any genuine care for her neighbors. As Sarah navigated this oppressive landscape, Karen's past seemed less like a distant memory and more like an ever-present threat looming over Maplewood Heights. If Sarah wanted to reclaim her sense of freedom and joy in this community, she would need to confront not just the regulations but also the deeply rooted cruelty that had stifled so many before her. The stakes were higher than mere yard decorations. They represented a fight for individuality against a backdrop of authoritarianism that had plagued their neighborhood for far too long. The following week, the HOA meeting loomed large in Sarah's mind like an oncoming storm. With the weight of her recent humiliation still fresh, her heart raced as she prepared to face Karen again. Armed with a list of questions and a sense of determination, she entered the community center with her head held high. But as soon as Karen took the floor, any hope for constructive dialogue evaporated. Karen wasted no time in vilifying Sarah's yard decorations during the meeting, twisting the narrative to paint Sarah as a reckless newcomer who threatened the neighborhood's integrity. The other residents watched in a mix of fascination and trepidation as Karen unleashed her verbal assault, pointing out how Sarah's offensive use of color detracted from their otherwise serene environment. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire, and Sarah felt tiny under their scrutinizing gazes. As Karen wrapped up her tirade by announcing Sarah's fine, laughter echoed around the room, mockery disguised as camaraderie among those too fearful to stand up to their leader. A surge of humiliation rushed through Sarah. It was clear this was more than just about yard decorations. This was a systematic effort to break anyone who dared challenge Karen's authority. That night, sitting alone in her newly decorated yard, Sarah felt an unfamiliar rage simmering beneath her skin. She had come to Maplewood Heights seeking tranquility but instead found herself victimized by someone wielding unwarranted power over people merely trying to lead their lives. In that moment, clarity washed over her. Enough was enough. A plan began to form within her mind, a way not just to retaliate against Karen but to unite the community against this reign of terror once and for all. Inspired by resistance and fueled by resolve, Sarah envisioned rallying her neighbors who had endured similar injustices at Karen's hands. They would reclaim their autonomy together and show that individuality wasn't something to be punished but rather celebrated. Determined and emboldened, Sarah prepared for a new chapter, one marked by resilience and unity against an oppressive regime that had long kept them in check. The battle lines were drawn. It was time for payback, but instead of revenge for its own sake, it would be a movement towards liberation from tyranny. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah set out to gather support from other residents who had felt the sting of Karen's oppressive rule. Over the next few days, she knocked on doors and introduced herself to neighbors, inviting them for an informal gathering at her house. Her vision was clear: they needed to unite against the common enemy that had stifled their community spirit for far too long. As the sun began to set on a warm Friday evening, a small group gathered in Sarah's backyard, a cozy sanctuary that now felt emboldened by hope. With encouraging smiles and shared stories of frustration, residents reminisced about times when they'd been targeted by Karen's relentless enforcement of arbitrary rules. The woman with the crimson front door spoke about how her family had been forced to repaint after a similar confrontation. A couple who once dared to host upbeat holiday parties recounted how they were shamed for their festive decorations, leaving behind bitterness instead of joy. Emboldened by this camaraderie, Sarah took center stage and proposed an audacious plan. "We deserve to express our individuality without fear," she asserted passionately. "Let's throw a neighborhood celebration, a festival that honors our uniqueness. We can deck out our lawns in vibrant decorations and invite everyone, showcasing what makes us proud." The idea sparked excitement as neighbors enthusiastically chimed in with suggestions. Some wanted to organize food stalls, while others dreamed of live music or games for children. This wasn't just about decorations anymore, it was a moment to reclaim their identities, transforming the oppressive atmosphere into something beautiful and welcoming. As plans began unfolding, the group faced the prospect of Karen's reaction with both apprehension and determination. They knew she wouldn't take kindly to their display of defiance but understood that moving forward meant embracing their differences together. With each passing day leading up to the festival, they distributed flyers promoting the event throughout Maplewood Heights, igniting curiosity among those who felt similarly stifled but remained silent. The gears were in motion. This joyous celebration would be their stand against an intimidating force. United in purpose and fueled by shared experiences, they readied themselves not just for fun and laughter but as a definitive answer to Karen's overreach, a bold declaration that they would no longer be silenced or oppressed. As excitement built in the neighborhood for the upcoming celebration, Sarah realized that they needed a tangible symbol of their unity to truly make an impact. Inspired by the idea of self-expression and community bonding, she proposed a community garden project. A garden would not only beautify Maplewood Heights but also serve as a testament to their collective defiance against Karen's rigid rules. Sarah began approaching her neighbors with the vision of creating a colorful garden that would reflect the unique personalities of each resident. She suggested using a vacant lot near the community center, which had been an eyesore for years and was often overlooked due to Karen's focus on maintaining conformity rather than fostering creativity. The idea resonated with many, who were eager to get involved and reclaim their space. As word spread about the garden scheme, residents signed up eagerly to contribute their time, resources, and plans. Sarah organized sessions where families could come together to plant flowers, vegetables, and herbs, each contributing something that represented their heritage or personality. A retired teacher proposed incorporating a small butterfly section to attract pollinators, a young couple offered to build whimsical trellises, and even the elderly neighbor who once felt silenced volunteered seeds from her beloved rose bushes. Meanwhile, Sarah's plan subtly painted Karen as an obstacle to community happiness. While working on the garden, residents shared stories about how Karen's strict enforcement of regulations had stifled their joy in the past. The more they bonded over shared experiences of oppression, the clearer it became that this garden wasn't just about flowers, it was about reclaiming their right to express themselves freely. When Karen caught wind of the project, she wasted no time in attempting to shut it down under various regulations about communal spaces. But instead of retreating in fear, Sarah and her neighbors rallied together, presenting a united front at the next HOA meeting. They transformed what could have been another confrontation into an uplifting dialogue about community values and happiness. With each meeting leading up to the garden's opening day, anticipation grew among residents while tension thickened in the air around Karen. The sight of vibrant blooms sprouting from what was once neglected land served not only as a beautiful addition to Maplewood Heights but also as a powerful statement against an oppressive force that had long held them back, a living testament to resilience and unity amidst adversity. With the community garden plans set in motion, Sarah knew that momentum was key to ensuring its success and making a real statement against Karen's oppressive rule. Inspired by the enthusiasm of her neighbors, she turned to social media and flyers to spread the word about the initiative. Sarah created a dedicated Facebook group for Maplewood Heights where residents could share ideas, post updates, and express their excitement for the upcoming project, inviting those who felt stifled to join in. The response was overwhelming. Neighbors began sharing their own stories of frustration with Karen's strict enforcement of regulations and how they longed for a more vibrant community spirit. Sarah's posts were met with likes and comments from those who had remained silent for too long. The movement began gaining traction, transforming it into not just a garden project but a rallying cry for change. Sarah also designed colorful flyers that she distributed around the neighborhood, featuring enticing images of plants and flowers alongside slogans like, "Plant the seeds of change," and "Let's grow together." The flyers included details about upcoming planting days, potluck gatherings at the garden site, and opportunities to share gardening tips. Each flyer was met with smiles as residents eagerly took them home to hang on their doors or pass along to neighbors. As excitement grew, Sarah organized a series of informal meetups at local coffee shops where residents could brainstorm ideas for the garden's layout and discuss which plants they wanted to contribute. These gatherings became vibrant forums where laughter filled the air alongside passionate discussions about reclaiming their community from Karen's grip. Word of their initiative began spreading beyond their immediate circle as curious onlookers from neighboring areas expressed interest in joining. The sense of camaraderie blossomed into something beautiful. People who once felt isolated now found strength in numbers. Even as Karen continued her attempts to undermine the garden project through various complaints filed with the HOA board, Sarah noticed that her tactics only served to galvanize further support among residents. The community was no longer afraid, they were emboldened by their shared experiences and united in purpose. As planting day approached, anticipation reached a fever pitch. Residents were ready not just to dig into the soil but also to dig deep into their resolve against an oppressive force that had stifled them for too long. This garden would become more than just a patch of land, it would symbolize their collective spirit, a testament that together they could uproot tyranny and cultivate joy in Maplewood Heights once again. As enthusiasm for the community garden flourished, Sarah began to notice Karen's peculiarities and vulnerabilities. It was clear that while Karen ruled with an iron fist, she was also deeply insecure about her authority. This realization sparked an idea in Sarah's mind: what if they could turn the tables on Karen with a series of light-hearted pranks that would highlight her absurdity without causing real harm? The first prank involved creating fake fines. Sarah and a few of her neighbors crafted humorous violation notices for Karen's own front yard. They noted infractions such as excessive use of potted plants and violation of color harmony in bold letters, playfully mocking the very regulations she imposed on others. They even signed it with a fictitious name from the HOA board, adding an air of authenticity to their jest. As they placed the notices on her doorstep, laughter erupted among the group, imagining Karen's reaction when she'd find them. They took pictures to capture the moment, a little memento of their rebellion against her controlling nature. Next, Sarah decided to play up Karen's obsession with rules even further by creating exaggerated rule signs throughout the neighborhood. With the help of some crafty neighbors, they designed oversized signs declaring absurd regulations like "no laughing loudly in public spaces" and "mandatory beige color for all garden gnomes." Each sign was strategically placed in areas where residents gathered or passed by frequently, injecting humor into their daily routines. The residents embraced these antics, finding joy in the shared experience and camaraderie. Conversations about Karen quickly shifted from fear to laughter as they exchanged stories about her past grievances. The playful pranks united them further, creating a bond that reinforced their resolve against Karen's tyrannical reign. While they knew there remained a serious underlying issue with Karen's control over their lives, these light-hearted traps served as a pressure release valve for their frustrations. With each prank that spread through Maplewood Heights, it became increasingly clear that the community was no longer afraid of their HOA leader, they were ready to stand together as a united force. As the garden project approached its opening day, Sarah felt invigorated by the knowledge that humor and creativity could be powerful tools in their fight for freedom. It was not just about reclaiming their rights, it was also about enjoying the journey together, making memories along the way. With each laugh and prank, they chipped away at the oppressive atmosphere that had long gripped their neighborhood, signaling to Karen that her reign over Maplewood Heights was finally on shaky ground. As the community garden began to bloom with vibrant flowers and lush vegetables, a wave of joy swept through Maplewood Heights, contrasting sharply with Karen's increasingly agitated demeanor. Residents flocked to the garden, gathering to share gardening tips, enjoy picnics, and revel in the newfound sense of community. Laughter echoed as children played among the plants while neighbors exchanged stories and celebrated their collective achievement. But for Karen, who thrived on control and conformity, this blossoming was not just delightful, it was a direct threat to her authority. Determined to restore her grip on the neighborhood, Karen launched a series of desperate attempts to undermine the garden's success. She began by meticulously combing through the HOA's bylaws in search of obscure regulations she could exploit. One day, she knocked on Sarah's door with a printed list of codes regarding invasive species, claiming that some of the flowers planted were unauthorized and would need immediate removal. Sarah raised an eyebrow at Karen's over-the-top concerns but kept her composure, knowing that this was simply another attempt by Karen to incite fear and compliance. Unfazed by Karen's antics, Sarah and her neighbors continued tending to their garden. But Karen's agitation only grew. Soon, she attempted to rally support among other residents who still feared her control. She scheduled an emergency HOA meeting where she presented exaggerated concerns about the supposed threats posed by their garden, claims of attracting unwanted pests or even raising property values in an unpredictable manner that would devalue homes. To add humor to the escalating absurdity, Sarah enlisted her fellow gardeners to show up at the meeting dressed as amateur entomologists, complete with oversized glasses and lab coats adorned with bugs drawn in crayon. Their light-hearted approach not only diffused tension but also caught others off guard. It turned what should have been a serious confrontation into a lively spectacle filled with laughter. As they paraded into the meeting room, complete with props and playful chants about biodiversity and community spirit, it became clear that Karen's attempts at intimidation had backfired spectacularly. The audience erupted into laughter, an overwhelming sign that the tide had turned against her oppressive rule. With each ludicrous display from Karen, more residents began openly voicing their support for Sarah's initiative while sharing stories of how they too had felt stifled by her relentless need for control. The garden continued to flourish not just as a physical space but as a symbol of resilience against tyranny, a reminder that joy could thrive even under oppressive conditions. Each failed attempt by Karen only strengthened their resolve. It marked a turning point where fear transformed into determination. As the community rallied around their growing garden and newfound camaraderie deepened, it became evident, together they were ready to push back against tyranny and cultivate an environment where individuality could flourish freely. As the community garden grew into a symbol of hope and resilience, tensions between Karen and the residents reached a boiling point. During one particularly charged HOA meeting, Karen stormed in, her face flushed with frustration as she addressed the crowd. She wasted no time, declaring that the community garden was a violation of multiple HOA regulations and that it had to be dismantled immediately. "This chaos must be put to an end," she proclaimed, glaring at Sarah. The room fell silent momentarily before murmurs of disbelief swept through the crowd. Residents exchanged glances, their unity, previously fostered by laughter and shared labor, threatened by Karen's ultimatum. They had been emboldened by their garden project, feeling empowered to express their individuality in ways they hadn't dared before. Dismantling the garden felt like an erosion of everything they had worked so hard for. Sarah rose to speak, her heart racing but her resolve firm. "We've created something beautiful together," she argued, gesturing toward the photos displayed around the community center showing flower blooms and happy gatherings from their garden efforts. "This garden is not just about plants, it's about us taking back our space and building a vibrant community." Karen responded with disdain, insisting on adherence to rules and shaming the group for their defiance. "You are endangering property values," she warned dramatically, drawing exaggerated gasps from a few residents who still feared her control. Yet this time, instead of backing down, several brave neighbors began to rise in support of Sarah. One by one, they shared their own stories about how Karen's oppressive tactics had silenced them in the past. It quickly became clear that more than a handful of residents were eager to stand against her. A wave of support surged as voices echoed throughout the room. The mood shifted palpably as people found comfort in one another's solidarity against tyranny. With each confession of fear turned into strength, Karen's attempts at intimidation grew weaker, her authority visibly crumbling before their eyes. As the meeting progressed into heated debate, it became evident that neither side would easily concede ground. But with each passing moment of shared determination amongst residents, it was clear that Karen's reign over Maplewood Heights was nearing an end. The grassy patch that once lay neglected now stood as a testament not only to nature's beauty but also to unity forged through adversity. In those charged moments during the meeting, both sides found themselves aware. Sarah and her neighbors were ready to fight for what they believed in, not only for their vibrant garden but for a future unmarred by Karen's oppressive rule, and music started playing softly outside as children danced among blooming flowers just beyond the window, a stark reminder of what they were truly fighting for. As the heated HOA meeting continued, the sense of defiance among the residents only intensified. Sarah stood firm, advocating for the community garden and its importance as a symbol of their collective spirit. She could feel the palpable energy in the room shift. The whispers, nods, and supportive glances gave her hope that they could weather this storm together. Then, in a dramatic turn of events, several residents began to rise from their seats. One by one, neighbors who had previously felt silenced took a stand alongside Sarah, voicing their frustrations and sharing their own experiences under Karen's reign. A retired couple recounted how they were shamed for simply wanting to paint their fence a cheerful color. Another neighbor spoke about being fined for hosting book club meetings in her backyard. Each story resonated deeply, showcasing how Karen's control had stifled individual expression for far too long. The tension culminated when a young mother stepped forward with her arms crossed defiantly. "This garden is not just a patch of flowers," she declared, her voice steady and clear. "It represents our right to create a community that reflects who we are, not what rules dictate." A wave of applause erupted from supporters as the atmosphere transformed. It was no longer just Sarah against Karen, it was an entire community joining forces against oppression. Karen's reaction was one of shock and disbelief as she tried to regain control of the narrative. Yet her attempts to intimidate fell flat when faced with such unified resolve. The residents rallied around each other, chanting slogans like, "Bloom together," and "No more silence." Their voices echoed through the community center, filling it with an infectious energy that left no room for Karen's authority. In that moment, the residents realized their power in numbers. Collectively, they could challenge the status quo that had loomed over them for so long. The realization sparked hope, that they could foster a neighborhood built on mutual respect and celebration of individuality rather than conformity and control. As the meeting progressed, Karen found herself isolated amidst a sea of determination and camaraderie. It became clear that her once unyielding grip on Maplewood Heights was crumbling. With every supportive voice expressing solidarity with Sarah's initiative, it became evident that the tide had shifted unmistakably in favor of freedom, and they would no longer accept anything less. This shared experience of unity underscored their commitment not just to defend the garden but also to reshape their neighborhood into a place where everyone could thrive authentically. The meeting ended on a high note as laughter and chatter filled the air. Together they had forged strong connections, one that would carry them towards liberation from tyranny and cultivate joy within Maplewood Heights for generations to come. In the wake of the charged HOA meeting, the momentum against Karen's authoritarian rule reached a climax. The once dominant figure found herself increasingly isolated as residents rallied to support one another and their vision for a vibrant community. Fueled by the collective voices of dissent, a petition began circulating, demanding Karen's resignation from her position as head of the HOA. It was clear that enough was enough, the community was ready for a change. Sarah and her neighbors worked tirelessly to gather signatures, emphasizing the importance of fostering an environment where everyone could thrive. The petition not only called for Karen's ousting but also proposed new guidelines aimed at promoting community engagement and inclusivity, rather than stifling creativity and individuality. As more residents signed on, the sense of empowerment spread like wildfire through Maplewood Heights. When the day of the next HOA meeting arrived, anticipation buzzed in the air. Residents filled the community center, their faces a mixture of determination and hope. Sarah stood at the front, clutching the petition, a physical representation of their collective strength. As she began to speak, her heart raced with excitement and purpose. "We stand here today not just to remove one person from power but to reclaim our community spirit," she declared passionately. With her words ringing in their ears, a wave of support surged through the audience. One by one, residents shared their stories of how Karen's heavy-handed tactics had suppressed their joy and individuality. With each testimony, it became more evident that they were not just fighting for themselves but for a community that thrived on diversity and creativity. Eventually, a representative from the board acknowledged the overwhelming sentiment in the room. "It's clear that we need to reevaluate our leadership and our approach to community guidelines," he stated, glancing at Karen, who sat stiffly, her expression unreadable. The energy shifted again as cheers erupted and applause filled the room. The climactic vote was held that evening. With all eyes on the board members as they tallied the results, it became apparent that Karen's time as head of the HOA had come to an end. When it was announced that she had been voted out by an overwhelming majority, jubilant cheers erupted throughout the crowd. In her place, the residents collectively agreed on new leadership, individuals who understood the importance of fostering a welcoming environment that embraced differences rather than stifling them. The rules governing their community were rewritten to reflect this newfound commitment to engagement and creativity. As Sarah looked around at her smiling neighbors celebrating this monumental victory, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Together they had transformed Maplewood Heights into a place where individuality could flourish without fear, ensuring that joy reigned supreme in their beloved community garden and beyond. The dawn of a new chapter had begun, one filled with hope and unity for all residents. As Sarah surveyed the thriving garden, the symbol of resilience and community spirit in Maplewood Heights, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment wash over her. The journey from confronting tyranny to witnessing collective courage had transformed her perspective on revenge and empowerment. Initially, her desire to challenge Karen stemmed from a need for personal vindication against the oppressive rule that stifled her joy. However, this path led to something far greater, the unification of her neighbors in a cause that transcended individual grievances. The laughter and chatter in the garden resonated with Sarah as children played among vibrant flowers, their laughter echoing like a promise for a brighter, more inclusive future. What started as a fight for individual expression had blossomed into a fierce commitment to community engagement. Sarah realized that true satisfaction lay not in retribution but rather in nurturing connections and fostering an environment where everyone felt valued and heard. Reflecting on Karen's ousting, it struck Sarah how personal vendettas could often lead to isolation, but this collective uprising tied them together, creating bonds rooted in shared experiences and newfound hope. In taking action together against Karen's oppressive authority, they had woven a tapestry of camaraderie that would strengthen their neighborhood's fabric for generations to come. Sarah recognized that every neighbor who stepped forward at the meetings was not just echoing their discontent, they were reclaiming their dignity, a universal human right often undermined by fear. As she walked through the garden, she was reminded of how their unity was now shaping the narrative of Maplewood Heights, illustrating the positive change that can emerge from collective action. The movement toward inclusivity did more than dismantle authoritarian control, it also fostered creativity and joy, principles essential for any thriving community. With pets frolicking alongside children and beds overflowing with diversity in bloom, Sarah understood this victory meant embracing individuality instead of dictating conformity. As she tended the garden with friends old and new under the warm sun, she felt empowered by the realization that their fight wasn't merely about overcoming one individual's rule, it had evolved into a celebration of shared values that brought richness back into their lives. With every budding flower signifying growth and resilience, Sarah found comfort in knowing they had created an inviting landscape where happiness would flourish unencumbered, not through vengeance, but through solidarity and understanding, forever altering the essence of Maplewood Heights. This was merely the beginning. Their journey ahead would focus on cultivating lasting joy for all residents, reflecting an enduring commitment to rebuilding community bonds stronger than before.